Hello, my name is Martin Lackeus. I work at Chalmers University of Technology in Sweden as a teacher and researcher. I do research on how to make people more entrepreneurial through education. I explore this on all levels of education. That's the topic of this video, summarizing 7 years of PhD thesis work in 10 crammed minutes. I've also gathered my research, including my finished PhD thesis, on my blog, vcplist.com. Entrepreneurship could be viewed as people creating something new of value to someone else. It can result in economic value, social value, enjoyment value, harmony value, or influence value. The arrow in the picture goes in both directions. Not only does the individual change the world around her, but the newly created value also significantly changes the individual. When creating value for someone else, you learn and develop profoundly. This strong ability of value creation activities to develop the individual is the foundation for my view of entrepreneurial education. When teachers use this as a teaching strategy, I call it value creation pedagogy. It could even be viewed as a new educational philosophy. I view entrepreneurship broadly and define it primarily as value creation rather than venture creation. This makes it relevant to infuse entrepreneurship into all levels of education and for all students. Those who want to learn more can self-select into courses and programs treating venture creation and sustainable venture creation. Such a progression is important in my view of a unified field of entrepreneurial education, rather than the slightly misleading terms enterprise or entrepreneurship education. It is often said that the only way to make people more entrepreneurial is to apply learning by doing, inspired by educational philosopher John Dewey more than 100 years ago. But still today we are missing good answers to the question, learning by doing what? Progressive education as defined by Dewey triggered new problems requiring new solutions. Almost a century later, teachers trying to implement progressive education often find themselves juggling like the dog Pluto, with all balls falling down simultaneously. It often becomes complex when teachers try to realize the dream of individualized and socially situated learning. Much calmer then to go for traditional education, particularly in an education system that rewards this in many ways through emphasis on standardized tests and a common core curriculum. This struggle between traditional and progressive education has been going on for centuries. Individual versus social, content versus process, theory versus practice. The winner so far has been traditional education, thanks to its simplicity in implementation and assessment. On the winning side, we find politicians who like to follow simple measures that work on TV, preferably one single digit per country, such as the OECD PISA survey. On the challenger side, we find researchers who prefer a more in-depth understanding, and of course many teachers who every day see that there are no simple standard solutions. 1938, Dewey wrote that the solution to this problem requires a well thought out educational philosophy. Three proposed philosophies have been problem-based learning, project-based learning, and service learning. A fourth philosophy has been discussed a lot in the past decade, entrepreneurial learning, but few can define what exactly is new with this. I thought I'd give it a try. While the first three philosophies are about solving problems, preferably with authentic content and in teamwork, entrepreneurial education is about all of this too, but also some additional dimensions, such as opportunities to create value for others in a repetitive and experimental process, an entrepreneurial process. The result is some kind of artifact, often both innovative and valuable. An entrepreneurial process often leads to failure, which is perhaps even more developmental than when you succeed. To summarize what's new, we have previously focused a lot on learning through, but when we infuse entrepreneurship into education, we are actually adding creating value for others, and thereby giving a firm answer to the question, learning by doing what? But why would value creation be important in education? Well, my research has focused on the role that emotions play in learning. When we let students take action, such as through value creation or venture creation, it triggers emotional events such as uncertainty, interaction with the outside world, and presentations in front of people you don't know. These emotional events then develop entrepreneurial competencies, such as self-insight, uncertainty tolerance, self-efficacy, and social skills. The emotionality also improves the learning of subject-specific content knowledge being applied in the process. Some links between emotional events and developed entrepreneurial competencies have been particularly strong according to my empirical research. Here we can also see how value creation is an unexplored middle way between creation and venture creation. Instead of complicating things by asking students to start a real-life business involving accounting, money, legislation, and trademarks, they can be asked to use their knowledge and skills to help someone with something. We can also see a novel assessment strategy for such assignments here, based on what I have labeled the proxy theory. Emotional events can be viewed as a proxy between educational design and learning outcomes. Such events are much easier to assess than the resulting entrepreneurial competencies. This is an activity-based assessment strategy, in many respects similar to formative assessment and constructive alignment. Through these steps, my research led me to articulate a tentatively new educational philosophy. Let students learn by applying their existing and future competencies to create something, preferably novel, of value to at least one external stakeholder outside their group, class, or school. In my PhD thesis, which you can download from my blog, you can read more about value creation as educational philosophy. So, what's new with this, you might ask? To try to answer that, I sketched up what I call the philosophical playing field of education. We have traditional versus progressive education, but we also have classroom versus field-based experiential education. We start in the lower left quadrant, asking a crucial question to our students in the classroom or lecture hall. For whom is this knowledge valuable today? Then we let students explore answers. We let them apply their emerging competencies to actually create something of value to someone outside the classroom. Then they come back and we let them ask themselves, how did it feel? What do we know now? For whom was this knowledge valuable today? In a way, it's like sending the students out in a learning orbit, like a boomerang. This way, the teacher can span the entire philosophical playing field of education, which has been stated by Stanford Professor of Education Linda Darling-Hammond to be one of the greatest challenges that teachers face today. Entrepreneurship provides a rhythm to a learning dance that students can perform, determining when the classroom door should be open and when it should be firmly shut to allow for reflection and focus on theory. This allows for bridging a rift of dualisms in education, rather than getting stuck in conflicting perspectives. Entrepreneurship provides simplification, triggers students to take responsibility, lets them see what effects they can create by applying theory in practice, and teachers can assess the process by specifying in detail which kinds of emotional events their students are supposed to learn from. So, why is it so unusual today with students creating value for others? Well, many of us live in an individualistic society, and perhaps it is because of an altruistic paradox that the motivating power of doing good for others has escaped common sense among many teachers. I would say that we get more motivated by creating value for others in 15 minutes than by creating value for ourselves in 15 years. We should then rather ask our students, for whom is this knowledge valuable today, than to tell them, you will have use for this in your future. In my research, I have looked at examples around the world of students creating value for others on all levels of education, from preschool to MBA students. What we can see is that value creation triggers strong engagement and motivation among students on all levels. The perceived relevance to their life world makes them learn in ways they have never learned before, and they acquire not only entrepreneurial competencies, but also theoretical content knowledge on a whole new level. When it's for real, it becomes important, and this triggers deep learning, and it works especially well for students at risk of dropping out of school. These are some of the key findings from my research, where we have developed a mobile app-based experience sampling method built on a system called LoopMe to explore student perspectives on value creation in education. What strikes me is that the best reason for infusing entrepreneurship into education is probably not the common argument around economic growth for society, but rather the powerful learning it triggers in our students. My data shows that entrepreneurship viewed as value creation for others really makes education come alive, without losing out on content, rather the opposite, by bridging theory and practice. To help teachers, we have put together a number of resources. I will not go through them here in detail, but there is a process going from preparation through process to output. There is also a spider diagram that works kind of like a checklist. And there is a form that teachers can use when designing value creation assignments for their students. There is also an entrepreneurial toolbox that many teachers have found to be especially helpful, articulating questions such as what effects can I create and what works, and statements such as let's make a prototype and test your hypotheses outside school. Well, that's all for now. You can find more information on my blog, vcplist.com. I'll leave you with a quote from one of the most experienced teachers in value creation pedagogy. When the value creation bug has stuck inside me and my students, it is difficult to start up one single theme without some student asking, who will we be doing this for? Thank you.